Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on families facing addiction. In this morning's webinar, we will discuss the following objectives: identifying roles within a functional family, the disruption of homeostasis when addiction enters the family, the roles within a dysfunctional family and the importance of maintaining self-care, the difference between enabling and helping, correct reactions when dealing with an individual with an addiction, common roles children take on in families facing addiction, and ways to help families better understand the addiction and recovery process. Some of the characteristics of a functional family include individuality, open and flexibility, their needs are fulfilled, there's accountability, and laws are open and flexible. In definitions explaining the functionality within a family, we have the freedom to express the 5 expressions, which is in order to be fully functional, each human being needs to express freely the 5 basic powers that constitute human strength, which are the power to perceive, to think and interpret, to emote, to choose, want, and desire, to be creative through the use of imagination. Unfolding process of intimacy. The marriage, as the chief component of the family, needs to be in the process of becoming intimate. The process goes through the stages of in love, working out differences, compromise and individualization, and then plateau intimacy. Negotiated differences. Negotiating differences is the crucial task in the process of intimacy. To negotiate differences, there must be the desire to cooperate. This desire creates the willingness to fight fair. Clear and consistent communication. Clear and consistent communication are keys to establishing separateness and intimacy. Clear communication demands awareness of self and others, as well as mutual respect for each other's dignity. Trusting. Trust is created by honesty. Accurate expression of emotions, thoughts, and desires is more important than agreement. Honesty is self-responsible and avoids shaming. Individuality. In functional families, differences are encouraged. The uniqueness and unrepeatability of each person is the #1 priority. Open and flexible. In functional families, the roles are open and flexible. One can be spontaneous without fear of shame and judgment. Their needs are fulfilled. Happy people are getting their needs met. A functional family allows all of its members to get their needs met and fulfilled. Accountability. Functional families are accountable. They are willing to acknowledge individual problems as well as family problems, and they will work to resolve those problems together. And laws are open and flexible. The laws in a functional family will allow for mistakes. They can be and are negotiable. So what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is a key concept in understanding how our bodies, as well as our families, work. It means keeping things constant and comes from 2 Greek words, meaning homeo, which is similar, and stasis, which means stable. Families have a remarkable ability to maintain what most family therapists call homeostasis. But when substances are introduced into a family system, the family's ability to regulate its emotional and behavioral functioning is severely challenged. The family will generally reach as a unit a balance itself, and this may become a sort of dysfunctional balance. Their life becomes hiding the truth from themselves, their children, and their relational world. Trust and faith in an orderly and predictable world can be challenged as their family life becomes chaotic. Promises are broken, and those they depend upon for support and stability or behave in untrustworthy ways. Children are often left to fend for themselves, and anyone bold enough to confront the obvious disease may be branded as a family traitor. Family members may withdraw into their own private worlds or compete for the little love and attention that is available. In the absence of a reliable adult, siblings may become parentified and try to provide the care and comfort that is missing for each other. Family members do not feel free to express their authentic selves for fear of triggering disaster. And the family becomes organized around trying to manage the unmanageability of addiction. The guilt and shame that family members feel at the erratic behavior within their walls, along with the psychological defenses against seeing the truth, all too often keep this family from getting help. And again, just to recap what happens when homeostasis disrupts the family, if they lose their ability to regulate its emotional and behavioral functioning. Family members slip into patterns of increased dysfunction. Children often are left to fend for themselves. There's often withdrawal within certain family members. Family members often avoid a genuine connection with each other. The systems tend to perpetuate and manufacture trauma, and there's a loss of trust and ability to communicate. Before we get into the roles within the addicted family, I want to talk about the importance of how it is, even though we follow some of the guidelines in terms of caring for loved ones when they're dealing with an addiction and how we care for ourselves. Oftentimes we talk about there is a textbook model that we follow when we are moving through from addiction into recovery. And oftentimes I've seen a lot of families that have followed textbook, what we call textbook model in terms of handling the transition from functional family into a family struggling with addiction. And it oftentimes seems very cut and dry when we are moving into that transition and then we are moving into our own recovery. Textbook seems very cut and dry, but real life is not always that simple. So it is important to understand that even though there are platforms for which each individual family and individual person with their addictions treatment may look, it is not necessarily real life does not work out that way. So it is important to treat it individually when we are looking at our own family or working with families that may be suffering with addiction. It is not always as easy as it seems it could be. So it's important to keep real life in mind when we are looking at problems that are associated with addiction. I've seen many families who have followed the creed of not enabling, and yet they have struggled severely and oftentimes ended in loss when dealing with addiction. So it is important that we keep that in mind. So what are the roles within an addicted family? The first one that we come to is the rescuer. The rescuer, also called the caretaker, it covers up events and behaviors. It often denies that there's a problem. As the disease progresses and problems escalate, the rescuer takes on the responsibilities that were once the addicted person's. The rescuer also doesn't let the incident become the problem. The rescuer is the person that likes to come rescue. So this is the person that will take on a lot of brunt of the responsibilities, likes to be the person that sort of makes it appear as though the incident going on within the family is not as significant as it may seem, or that things are under control. The provoker reacts by punishing the addicted person for their actions. They may scold or nag, belittle or ridicule, and insult them regardless of who's listening. They show outward anger. They may threaten to leave but never do. The provoker is someone who is outwardly displaying signs of agitation or frustration with situations that are occurring within the home and aren't necessarily directing them at the individual and not necessarily recognizing that what frustrations and anger they are feeling aren't specifically at the person but are at the disease and are being channeled towards the individual that they care about. They love this person, which is why they end up staying, but they're not sure about how to go about channeling the frustrations and anger that they feel. They feel that if they punish the person that they care about, or if they make them feel as though what they're doing is wrong and shameful, that this person will change, not recognizing at this point that what their loved one or the person they care about is dealing with is a disease. The provoker and the rescuer, the first two that we're talking about at this point, as well as the martyr, which we're getting ready to cover, all individuals who care greatly about the loved one that they're dealing with, but also need treatment and care for themselves so that they can learn how to move through the addiction and move into their own recovery and separate themselves from the disease and be able to treat their own issues that have arose as a result of the transition within their families. And as I mentioned, the martyr is ashamed of the addicted person's behavior. They may cry or pout, sulk and isolate. They withdraw and feel depressed. They play the victim. They apply guilt and shame in an attempt to solve the problem. This is the person that may say, if you love me, you'll stop doing this, in an effort to think that the guilt they're placing on the individual will be the catalyst to move this individual into treatment or get them to stop using. Also another person that isn't quite to the precipice of realizing that their loved one is not using because they don't care about them, but that in fact it is a disease. So what are some things that we can do to take care of ourselves when we're in a position of having someone we care about that is suffering with addiction? The first thing that we do is we learn to take care of ourselves. Living with an addict is exhausting. You need to take time to recover for yourself. Avoid self-blame. We can't control another person's decisions, and we can't force them to change. Do not work harder than the person you are trying to help. The best approach is to not do things for the addict, but instead be an example of balance and self-care. Being a caretaker is not good for you or the individual with the addiction. Understand that there is only so much you can do to change another person. Ask for help. Talk to a professional. Go to a support group such as Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Smart Recovery, any other faith-based. Do not argue or try to discuss things with an individual with their addiction when they are under the influence. It won't get you anywhere. It will only increase your frustrations. And if at all possible, try not to be negative when dealing with the individual with their addiction. That may only increase their feelings of guilt and push them further into using. Three very important C's to remember when dealing with the individual with their addiction. You did not cause their addiction. You cannot control the addiction, and you sure can't cure the addiction. What we do is we can help support them through their transition while we support ourselves. And we mentioned enabling and helping earlier and there's one thing that I've always carried with me when working with families and having people ask me, what is the difference? How do I know if I'm helping? How do I know if I'm enabling? And the one thing that has always stuck in any conversation that I've had with families, and this is kind of an example that I've given people over the time, is when you are doing something for someone that they cannot and should not be doing for themselves, that is helping. When you are doing something for someone that they can and should be doing for themselves, that is an indication of an enabling behavior. And that is something that examples that I would give in this instance would be if an individual had come down with a serious illness and has been hospitalized for a significant period of time. They are unable to work at that point in time. not by any fault of their own, but they're unable to work. If they need assistance paying bills at that time, that would be a time where it would be an indication of a helping behavior. If an individual is able to work and just is not working, or their money from their job is going towards the use of alcohol or drugs, and they need assistance paying bills at that time, that is where we are looking at more of enabling behavior. So which role in an addictive family is an enabler? The answer for this is all of them. The rescuer enables by stopping the consequences. The individual with the addiction doesn't have to face or admit the problem. The individual with the addiction never has to feel the pain of the disease. They don't have to feel the uncomfortableness that comes along with addiction. And for the provoker and the martyr, their reaction becomes the focus. When the individual with an addiction doesn't have to face the consequence because the focus is shifted towards the anger and the guilt and the shame and the withdrawn depression of the individuals in the provoker and the martyr role, those symptoms become the focus as opposed to the consequences that come along with the addiction. And the primary goal of manipulation for the provoker and the martyr is through the guilt that's associated with it, not the concrete consequences that are associated with addiction. The individual with an addiction will not face their own behavior, but will instead escape by using again, because they're not looking to face the guilt and the anger and the shame that's associated with the provoker and the martyr. So what is the correct reaction when we're dealing with an individual with an addiction? And the correct answer is not to react at all. What we want to do is to let the individual with the addiction face their own behaviors. Leave them to feel their own guilt, their own embarrassment, or other consequences. This way, the family member's reaction does not become the problem or the focus. When we leave them to face their own behavior, when they say they walk in the morning and we know that they've been out, they're anticipating our reaction. When there is no reaction to come from us, then they are left to face their own feelings about their use. They're left to feel their own shame. They're left to feel their own internal consequences and perhaps face their own external consequences, which makes it much more real in terms of reaching their decision of, am I done? Do I need to reach treatment? Their decision to go into treatment or make changes about their life then becomes about them and not doing it for other people. Until the individual with the addiction is ready to reach out for help with his or her problem, we need to realize that all the scolding and manipulation and controlling efforts on another part will not do any good. And the results of the non-addicted individual just gets pulled further and further into the family disease of addiction. And that's where we talk about having it be a family disease. When non-addicted individuals, make all their efforts and all of their strides and all of their efforts are into getting their loved one healthy, that part becomes their own addiction. And when individuals are able to keep themselves separated from allowing their loved one to make their own choices and suffer their own consequences, that's part of maintaining their own health and their own mental well-being. And that is what keeps individuals of a non-addiction from getting pulled further and further into the precipice of addiction. It is hard to stand back and watch somebody we care about make those difficult choices that may lead them further into their addiction. But understanding that it is allowing some of those decisions to happen in order for real change to occur. And part of a family that is facing addiction, oftentimes there are children, as we talked about in the earlier part in dealing with homeostasis. What are some of the common roles that are taken on by children? The common roles taken on by children that serves to protect themselves. They provide a means of escape for these individuals. The roles correlate closely with individual coping methods. And some of the mechanisms adopt to deal with pain, confusion, dysfunction, associated fears that they may have. Some children express problems very openly, where others deeply suppress and hide problems. Some are more pronounced with lack of outside resources, and some have severe codependency, which is pretty common within their home. And the first role we're going to talk about today is that of the clown. The clown, which entertains others to avoid their pain, entertains others as a distraction to the attention from the real problems within the home. They entertain others in order to get attention. They use constant humor to avoid reality, often experiences difficulty in school due to humor or lack of an attention span. They're usually very immature. They use their immaturity to gain attention or maintain distraction. And this child is usually very insecure. Oftentimes, this child does not go as being noticed as being insecure because this is a child on the outside that projects as being relatively secure. They use their humor as a means of vibrato, and it does not come across as being recognized as an insecure child because they are presenting as a means of maybe taking care of others around them in an effort to lighten the mood. They will draw the attention off of them. They take any kind of attention that will come to them through the use of their humor. So oftentimes these are the kids that people want to be around because they make them smile. So a lot of times you will see a child that may be the light of the class, light of the birthday party, the light of their friends. And as we get to know that child more, we see there's a great deal of inner pain and inner hurt within inside them, and they are actually very insecure. You may notice that this child has a very hard time staying on task and has a hard time relating to anything without the use of humor. Next, we have the disappearing child. This child often will identify through trying to adopt other families. It may fantasize about having a different family, will live in isolation, prefers solitary activities, is extremely introverted, quiet and withdrawn, avoids social interaction, and its favorite escape method is fantasy. So this is the child that you would see in the classroom that is often sitting off by itself, very into the fantasy online role games these days, does not have a lot of friends, does not openly talk, may get invited over to the one friend that they may have's house and wish to be a part of that family, or may fantasize about the family that it sees off in the distance and think it takes on the perception that that's the perfect family. It wants to be a part of that. They'll be very quiet, very withdrawn, and you won't get to know a whole lot about this kid. It takes a very long time to earn the trust of this child. When you do, this is almost what's the word I'm looking for, life ring that is being thrown to this child, and it is something that can help build this child's self-esteem over time, but is a very delicate relationship. This child is one that does not feel it is noticed or seen, so when that child is starting to get attention, usually positive attention, it does not know how to respond. Next, we have the scapegoat. The scapegoat is constantly acting out, constantly in trouble, gains attention while deflecting attention away from the individual with the addiction, openly defiant towards authority, likes the shock value, and the favorite method of escape is through anger. So this is the child that you'll see that is always acting out. You may think has anger issues, very defiant towards parents. Usually the individual that, or the adult that it is most defiant towards, is usually the individual that has the most animosity towards. So that tends to lead the question of what's going on with that individual that that child is most angered towards. This child is not used to living in a stable environment, therefore it has grown accustomed to coping in the means of deflecting attention in whatever way possible. It uses anger because this is the one that has gotten him the most response, or her, gotten him or her the most response. Being in trouble brings attention, and that is what has kind of latched onto. It is openly defiant because defiance and anger and acting out are what creates attention. Having the attention on this child keeps the attention away from the problems that are going on within the home. The bigger the shock, the bigger the response. So this is where this child has developed this method of coping and being the family scapegoat, if you will. And then next we have the hero, and the hero strives for constant perfection. They are overtly conscientious. They conform to all rules. They're constantly seeking approval, and in spite of high achievement, always feels inadequate. This individual is doing everything in their power to bring pride back into the family. They feel that if they can be absolutely perfect and be the best in everything that they do, that their family will fall back into a sense of normalcy. The feelings of inadequacy are coming because despite their absolute best effort and their perfection, there's still a break in their homeostasis. Their family is unbalanced. There's still a problem within their family. And then we have the super enabler. And the super enabler is emotionally closest to the individual with the addiction. It's the family workhorse. If this is the daughter will take over the household chores. If it's the son may be extremely protective of the mother if the father is the individual with the addiction. This child harbors a great deal of unexpressed anger. Their favorite fantasy is the role of the martyr, and the tendencies towards hypochondria, and they suffer from very low self-esteem. So it's important to know that with the roles that children may take on, their behaviors may tend to vary in different degrees. Normally they maintain one predominant role, but they also may vacillate between one role and another, and they may even play multiple roles. Attitudes and behaviors are carried into their adulthood, and they do tend to be pretty deeply ingrained. So if we are dealing with a child from an addicted family, then they will require at some point in time, it is recommended that they get into therapy to be able to work through a lot of the behaviors and traits that have been ingrained in them since an early age, because that's something that will prevail in adulthood, and you will see those tendencies and traits carry with them as they move through their later years. So how can we help families understand? There's 3 different areas that can be utilized to help families gain a better understanding of the addiction recovery processes. 1 would be to educate, 2, get them into treatment, and 3, use the community-based supports that are available in their area. So educating. Most families don't understand the addiction and recovery process. Families carry a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and often assume responsibility for their loved one's disease. Education can benefit greatly when they understand the addiction is, in fact, a disease. Gaining awareness of potential triggers, being able to avoid enabling behaviors, understanding that recovery is also a process and not an event, gaining a better understanding of the consequences that addiction has had in their own lives is very important. And then often families need to relearn the importance of self-care. And then for treatment, families should utilize family strengths and outside resources. This allows families to work together through their frustrations and resentments and fears. Um, I've seen a lot of families come through family treatment that have felt that they've come through unscathed, but as they've worked through family treatment or sat down with their loved one and had a family session, there seems to be a lot of undertow that maybe individuals in the family weren't aware of. There is frustration. There are resentments. There's definitely fears as families move forward through the recovery process. And there are a great deal of strengths within a family that can be built on. Too often we look at what hasn't worked or what are some of the roadblocks we need to face. But within each family, there are the strengths that we can use to get them to move over those hurdles. So it's important to take a look at what are the strengths, what are the resources we can line them up with to build off those strengths to help them overcome the resentments and the fears and resolve the frustrations. Allowing family members and loved ones to get the support they need, even when the person with the addiction is not quite ready for treatment themselves, is really going to allow greater healing within a family. I think that's a very important thing to remember. Just because an individual with an addiction is not quite ready to move into treatment themselves does not mean that the family needs to stay stagnant in the addiction. Some of the community-based support services that are available, we have Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Parents of Addicted Kids, which also stands for PAC. Faith-based, there's a lot of faith-based support services available. And community centers or other support systems of care are also popping up across the state as well. So that's where we are for today. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions? No questions? To answer that question, the question was, will the PowerPoint be available for us? Actually, this whole webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to our website and be available for display. If anybody would like a copy of the PowerPoint, please email me. My email is up on the screen, and you can certainly email me and I will get you a copy of the PowerPoint. Thank you, Bill. You're welcome. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions at any time, please feel free again to email me. My email is there on the screen. It's s.hastings@proa.org. Thanks, Chuck. You take care too. Yes, Bill. If you would like to shoot me an email, we can discuss that further. Thank you. My pleasure. Sure, you want the describe the childhood roles that are played out in adulthood. You're going to see similar effects in adulthood. So if you have the role of a clown as a child, or so you'll see that person still carrying out using the humor, perhaps immaturity, as well as, for the super enabler, they may be very protective. They may, all of their forms of coping skills would still be considered the same. So where they are using, the disappearing child uses fantasy, that person as they move into adulthood would still like fantasy. They would still be considered introverted, have difficulty with social interaction. The scapegoat would still probably use their anger as their best form of escape. They would have defiance with authority. They would still have issues with acting out. The clown would still be very insecure. They would use humor to avoid pain. So as we see them moving into their adulthood, it may not be as pronounced, but we're going to still see those traits that they identified through the different roles in childhood carry into adulthood. Does that answer your question? Thank you. What is my thoughts on? There is no continuing education credits that are or handed for this webinar, if that's what you're asking. This is not through a PCB. MAT would have to be another webinar. That's a whole lot of different information. And again, a copy of this webinar will be uploaded onto our website probably sometime over the next 2 weeks. And if anybody is interested in receiving a copy of the PowerPoint, please shoot me an email at s.hastings@proa.org. Email is on the screen, and I'll be happy to get a copy of that out for you. And yes, again, this PowerPoint is available to be emailed out. If you send me an email, I'll put my email down here in the chat box. If you want to send me an email, I'll be happy to email you a copy of the PowerPoint. Again, this webinar will be uploaded onto our website probably within the next 2 weeks. Any more questions at this time?